As you know, Black History Month is a time to reflect on the past, to celebrate the present, and inspire the future. This year's theme is super amazing. This year, we are saluting our sisters. Any sisters in the room? I didn't hear. Absolutely. So this year is all about Black women, celebrating the achievements, the trials and triumphs of Black women who are often the forgotten heroes and shouldn't be. So this time around, we are celebrating the Black woman. Black Kearney has a list of activities for you all month long, starting with a Sisterhood series. This is the first of a series that we'll be having every Tuesday, ending on the 31st of October. Please join us same time every Tuesday. This is not meant to be that kind of event where you just listen. You know me. So I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of participation from the audience in the room. And also for those who have joined us virtually, we would really like to hear your thoughts, comments, questions. Please put them in the chat on Teams. I'll be picking them up as we go along.
Yeah.
Nothing is too out of that. Just put any comments, thoughts,
Absolutely.
experiences, put them in the chat box. And if you're in the room, we can pass along the mic and there'll be a Q&A session at the end as well. So please feel free to drop your questions. Now, without much ado, let's kick this event off. I have a very special guest today. She's a force of nature. So happy to finally meet her. Our guest today is a mom of three, a wonderful mom of three. She's an acclaimed author. And recently, she's been the MD at Morgan Stanley, head of global firm resilience.
Yes.
She was also the first woman CEO of a telecommunications company in Ghana. Now, I can go on and on and on, but I have to leave her some to say. Join me in welcoming Lucy Quist.
Thank you.
Now, welcome, Lucy.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the warm welcome.
As I mentioned, there was a lot more accolades that I didn't see there. So I think I should give you a chance to introduce yourself because you will do a much better job than I just did.
Well, I'm assuming that a lot will come out through the Q&A as well. But first of all, thank you all for taking the time to be here. Those who are joining us virtually, those who are in person as well. I think that every time October is coming around, it gets me thinking about what we need to give in the month of October. It's a great learning time, but it's also about giving. And I'm hoping that through this session, you will all be inspired to find out, not just find out more, but share what you learned, because it's all about sharing what we know and that responsibility. So, Maxine has kindly talked about my family. My husband and I have these amazing kids who are no longer quite kids because they're all late teens. In March, the first one will be out of teen, which is always strange to really process. But look, I'm a chartered electrical and electronic engineer. I started my career in the automotive industry. I paid at Ford Motor Company. I literally grew up there, as in cut my teeth, learned all the things about how business works, moved around in different countries, met my husband, got married. I mean, it's like everything happened then. My former colleagues are literally still think of me as this child who grew up to be this woman there. After the automotive industry, I moved into, I went out, I did an MBA, moved into financial services. I worked at the Royal Bank of Scotland. It was just about a couple of years before I moved out to actually work on the African continent. And I'm hoping that as we go through today's session, we'll talk more about those experiences and my experience on the continent, working for 11 years on the continent, predominantly in telecommunications and some other interesting things. More recently, as you highlighted, I worked for Morgan Stanley. I worked there for over 4 years up until the end of August, up until August this year. So that's kind of a really brief snapshot of the last 3 decades that we'll get more into. So again, thank you.
So you are an electronics engineer.
Electrical and electronic, yeah.
That is a male-dominated field. How did you get into that field, and what were some of the barriers that you faced getting into that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, I will position most of what I would say around the experiences of women like me. And some of the people listening here are parents. I want to encourage them as well that what you say and do with your children really has a long-term effect. So my dad was an electrical and electronic engineer himself, and he really treated it as something that wasn't just his job, it was just who he was. So there was a lot of sort of engineering type things that happened in our house. And the interesting thing was that he always involved me. So he'll say, Lucy, go and get the toolbox. So we need to fix something. His favorite party trick by the time I was 5 was like, I promise you she can change a fuse. And because he had taught me what to do, so I could do it. And he also did things like teach me a lot of math. So I was being taught algebra when I was like 8 years old. And I was like, don't get it. You're mixing letters and numbers. That's not what we were taught in school. But it was a way of ensuring that not only was I prepared, but my interest was piqued. The other thing that he did was he never actually told me, no one ever told me that people didn't think women could be engineers, right? So I grew up not realizing that women aren't expected to be engineers. And subsequently, I went through my education, especially because I went to girls and guys girls school. Let's do that. Went to high school. And that was a school where, again, women were celebrated to really be the best of themselves and not feel, impeded. So it wasn't until I got to sixth form where I entered a sixth form that was a mix. It was a specific STEM dedicated sixth form. And I entered the sixth form, and so I had boys and girls. And suddenly I was in a class where some of the boys wondered what the girls were doing in the class. And I was very confused because by this time I'm much older as a teenager. I'm like, what? I'm not supposed to do this? I didn't know that. That was my first experience of feeling some of that pushback before actually going into engineering school, realizing that there was this expectation that we had to take different paths. So I think how you socialize a child is extremely important. That mindset, by the time I encountered people saying women shouldn't be engineers, it was a bit too late, right? If they told me earlier, if I got the memo earlier, I would have sat it out. But I was so passionate. I loved it. I even toyed with, oh, maybe I should be something else. I know, be a doctor or something. I'm like, no, this is what I really want to do. So I stuck with it. In my engineering class, I went to University of East London. My engineering class, there were 3 women. Just the 3 of us in the whole class. There was me from Africa, there was a lady from the Caribbean, and there was a lady from Sri Lanka. And that was it. It was the 3 of us. And we literally used to like huddle in front of the class. I mean, the guys at university were more open, and some of my good friends are from them. But you realize that what holds us back sometimes is perceptions outside of ourselves. And as we celebrate Black History Month, I would encourage people with this example that you have to determine whether what's holding you back is external to you or is truly something that is, if I really couldn't study engineering, that's a different, and it's okay not to be able to do it. There'd be something else I could be able to do, I'd be able to do. But if I had not pursued it because I'd been told I couldn't do it, that would be an opportunity lost for me, because then my engineering foundation is definitely why the rest of my career has happened. So I just encourage you to really have that perspective of, is this what people are saying and doing, or is this really about me? And you've got to make some of the things you do about you, about your capability, your capacity, your interest, and your passion.
Wow. So with these challenges, do you think there was any difference in that in your industry? Did you feel any different between you being you and, say, others from different groups?
I think that because I described that I started my career at Ford Motor Company, and the cohort that I was in, to be honest, I was the only Black person, let alone woman, in the 2 women. The other one, English, a white English. She's still my friend. She was actually one of my bridesmaids at my wedding, and so it was really the 2 of us. So in terms of being part of a cohort, you sort of get treated the same way. But I think that in the grander scheme of an engineering career, and bear in mind that I stayed in very technical oriented companies. I went into telecoms and so on. There were many times when I experienced this whole idea that I'd see someone else who I genuinely thought, well, I'm definitely more experienced than him, and I have the education, and maybe they take steps before more than I do. Now, I'm not trying to say that every single time you don't get an opportunity, it's because you're a Black woman. But I do think that because there aren't as many, it can be challenging for leadership, people in an organization to see you in that capacity.
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost as though it's you're being held back, not because it's an intentional sort of, I don't want you to make progress, but in the mind's eye says, well, I haven't seen anybody like you. I haven't seen anybody who could do this. So then you have to work harder and prove more to get there. A really good example happened in my telecoms career, that some of the assignments I had to do to get to CEO were assignments that I knew many men hadn't done to get to that position, but you have to prove yourself even more and really demonstrate hard work to get there. So I think we're still in this phase where any group of people, but particularly in this context of being a Black woman, the representation is still very low. And so you have to embrace the fact that for any group of people, you're underrepresented, the people who want to break through need to do more to be accepted and recognized. But once they break through, it helps others, makes it a little easier until we get to a point where it's the norm and no one notices it. We're not there yet, so we've still got work to do. But sometimes I say to people that you have to think that you're doing the work not just for yourself. The extra work that you have to do to prove it shouldn't be the case, but the extra work you have to do to prove it is because you're kind of creating a path for a whole host of people. So you're kind of paying for lots of different people to get there.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you talk about the inequities that exist within gender. But then you've got the extra layer on of being a Black woman in a space where there are very few of them.
Yeah.
So that intersectionality makes it more pronounced, if we can say that. Now, you mentioned a bit about your time as a CEO, the telecommunication data, but also more recently in your role at Morgan Stanley.
Yes.
How did you manage stereotypes and biases that you faced? I mean, if you faced any that you could share, and how you managed that?
Yeah, stereotypically, people, and I've seen this quite a number of times, especially women who are in more technically oriented roles, and it may not be sort of engineering, so to speak, but something that's viewed as a core requiring a core technical expertise. It's really interesting because you could end up with people trying to explain very basic things. And you're like, which part of my CV makes you think I don't know this or I don't understand this? So the stereotype is more driven by some people assuming that you don't know as much as you know, and you couldn't possibly know as much as you know, which really is a discredit to firms and organizations, because what you're effectively saying is that they made a mistake, that they put someone in a job who can't do the job. Now, so an example could be somebody trying to explain something really basic around 036 for your Office 365 to me, that is really, really basic. And I'm like, okay,
I'm the CEO.
Yeah, right. Or someone asking you about a basic question around, the network capacity utilization, right? Which, as an engineer, network capacity, even when I say the words, it's fairly straightforward for people to understand. So you do, but the really interesting one that happened, because when you have gender, race, and also people think you're young, that just completely blows it out.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I had a meeting with a supplier. You will not believe what this man said to me. I had a meeting with a supplier. He's waiting in the boardroom. I get called from my office. This is when I was CEO of a telco. I go into the boardroom to meet him. And he goes, "You're Lucy Quist?" I'm like, "Yes." "Oh, if I met you somewhere, I'd have bought you a drink." I'm like, "Excuse me? Really?" Now, the challenge with those situations is this. I'm always thinking about the soundbite, right? I'm very much a soundbite kind of person. So I think, okay, if I have an encounter with you and it's not a good encounter, if I give you a soundbite, you will go away and repeat that soundbite. You won't relay the soundbite. You won't see what happens. And so that perpetuates this image of, oh, she's prickly, which I'm not. So I always choose when to respond, and I decide who is worth my energy and who's not. And I'm very careful about the words I use so in this case with this man, I chose that he didn't deserve a soundbite, not from me. What he had to do was do as I said in the meeting, because you're the vendor and you're here to actually mea culpa and make sure you kept your contract. Forget about the drink. That's not what we're here for. You know, but that sort of, that it's almost patronizing in a way that could potentially throw you off.
Yeah.
So I encourage people who are from an underrepresented group, especially if you're really, really underrepresented, woman, you're ticking too many boxes. You really need to manage your energy, right? Your energy can't be invested in responding to people who see difference and have an issue with it. That's because remember, they get to spend their energy on growing themselves, performing, doing their best work. I need to spend my energy on that too. So you don't get to have my energy. It's mine to keep, and I choose who gets it and who doesn't get it. And so that's how I handled that one. But it shouldn't be part of the course. And remember what I said earlier about choosing to do things, whether it's the society that's telling you or whether it's what you really innately want to do. I think this is also just similar along those lines. I mean, I'm very, very energy driven. I feel that as human beings, we have a finite amount of time. None of us knows how long that is, but we also have a finite amount of energy. And I know that because, as I told you earlier, a certain time of night, I need to sleep. So I know my battery has run out. If I have the battery power for the day, what am I going to spend it on before it runs out? I'm certainly not going to, I'm going to minimize how much of it is wasted on people who don't deserve it.
You've addressed something that most people would not dare say these days, which is, and hey, let's address the elephant in the room. We bald head angry Black woman.
Oh, yes.
Not a good thing, but it gets said. And like we said, we're all friends here, so we can all talk about what we need to talk about. And you've addressed that, which is the response that one sometimes gives to people, because it's just, you get to the end of the day, or you get to the end of your wits, let's put it that way, and you might say something, you might correct, and all that people will see is
what you said.
But that's good advice for young people. Do not waste your time and be you.
Be you. Your energy is finite. Think about it. Whoever that person is, they're choosing to choose some of their energy to, in a misguided way, stir you up. Do you have to respond? You don't always have to respond. Think about, is this response going to advance anything that's of importance to me? Yes, no. No, okay, I'm not spending the energy. Yes, okay, let's have this conversation in a way that I have thought through and I have measured it and I know exactly what I'm going to do.
And I think this is useful for any underrepresented group. So really good. Now, if you just tuned in, yes, this is the audience reviews. Yes. And we've been going through some of the with us. Like I said before, we would like participation from the audience. So at any point in time, if you have a question, and if you are joined in virtually, can you kindly put your comments in the chat box? I will be checking this as we go along. For those joined virtually, if you have any technical issues, I think they're working on it. Now, we're going to talk about the book.
Okay, another why. Another manifestation of my why.
So, and we're going to have a Q&A, so you'd have more than ample opportunity to ask some of the other questions. But I wanted to quickly tell you on the book. It's an amazing book.
Thank you.
So following your TEDx talk.
Yes.
It was amazing too.
Thank you.
That's my favorite word for Lucy, amazing. You wrote the book.
Yes.
And it's the bold new normal.
Yeah.
Creating the Africa where everyone prospers.
Yes.
Now, with my kids. I've got some young kids, so I don't often get to read. I tell you, it is my best read for the year. What prompted you to write this book?
Yeah, really good question. So parents are such amazing people, aren't they? At least they can be, so try to be one. When I was about 7 or 8, my dad bought me the first first biography that he ever bought me, and I still have it. It looks really old and discolored, but it was the biography of the first president of Nigeria, Shehu Shagari. I still have it, and I don't know what he thought at that I was going to do with that book at that age, right? But he had this thing about, he would tell me that he would talk about books and he would talk about you'd write them or you'd be written about in them. He had all these ideas. So I guess somewhere in the recesses of my mind was this idea of a book buried somewhere in there. Now, after I wrote this book, I actually went back, because I always like to, I have books of things I'd like to do, things I plan to do. I'm a very sort of visionary person, and I think ahead to what I want to be and how I want to be. And I realized this book was published in 2019, but I realized that in 2010, when I was writing down the things I wanted, one of them was I'd like to write a book, right? But I didn't write a book. And then in 2014, when I became CEO of Airtel, I was totally inundated with young people asking for mentoring, coaching, guidance, and so on. So I took a step back and I thought, look, I really don't have the time to mentor everyone as I would love to, and do my job well. And if I do well, then it's all over. So I decided to use social media. So before then, I was quite hesitant about social media, and I started using social media very diligently and intentionally. So I'm a very intentional person. I organize my thoughts and what I do because I'm an engineer. So I had a strategy for social media that was crafted, that I would write on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, wake up at dawn and I'd write. And my goal was simply to mentor. So all the people that I'd love to meet, and I did meet them, but you see, if you have lots and lots of people, finite time, finite energy, finite everything, we're so finite that you've got to find ways to cut through how finite we are. So I started writing and mentoring and guiding through my social media, in addition to meeting people in person. And that's how my writing journey started. But it wasn't intended to be a writing journey. It was intended as a response. And by 2014, I'd worked on the African continent for 6 years. I would subsequently work more than the 6 years. And when I had gone first to work in 2008, I'd been driven by my why of change, right? And so I looked at everything through the lens of how can we fix this? How can we make that better? How? But I was also honest with myself in terms of what I was learning, what my frustrations were, what wasn't working. So all of that ended up coming out in this writing that I was doing. So I got to 2018 and I thought, actually, I'd like to write a book now, 4 years later. And so, I'd written lots of speeches. So you give an example of the TED Talk. When I did the TED Talk in 2016, I thought, this is 18 minutes to tell the world what I really, really think. So it was intentionally crafted. And I thought it would end there because 2016, I did the TED, so I thought, I've told them what I want to tell them, we're done. Except by 2018, it evolved into, I want to write a book. So the book was written very intentionally about the change. So the book is about change. And the book uses the context of Africa as a proxy to demonstrate the change that we need to have a more equitable world. But the focus is the people who are the subject of inequity, as opposed to what someone else should do. Because I feel that, and then this comes back to the heart of what we are doing with Black History. It's good to have Black History Month to come together, to talk, to speak, to connect with people who are want to be partner of it. But the change that we see is things that we need to own. I believe that people who experience the situation are best placed to change the situation and to be able to that you have to shift your mindset to embrace and think about the fact that you are the change that you need, that the change starts with you. So the book, takes the reader on this journey through actual experiences. So it's not a ideological, theoretical book. It is a this is what I saw, this is what happened, so there's so many stories I tell in the book, walking the reader through how do we create the bold new normal. And I call it the bold new normal because everything we see around us is our normality and we assume it to be so, right? And it's very have normal, fair enough. But the kind of change that we actually need to create equity for Africa, for Black people across the world, is one that actually needs boldness. This is the kind of change that someone this a little bit. No, it's a change that we need that says, I am going to confidently and boldly identify the issues, name the issues, address the issues, and I will start with the issues I need to address for myself. But by addressing the issues for myself, my community, the people around me, other people won't have a choice but to come along on that journey of change. So that's what normal is about. You know the number of people who think that they're not good enough for things that they do and do it anyway, right? The point is, go back to what I said about being a woman, being Black, what I was taught at home. Guys, forget this thing of this syndrome. Personally, I don't believe in it. And that's why I asked the question. Because especially for people in groups that are underrepresented, it's easy to fall into this trap of being an imposter. Now, my interpretation of imposter syndrome is that to what you just described about maybe people like me don't do this, it means that in our minds, we're accepting that there's a certain normative kind of person who should be doing this job. Says who? Who is that normative person who's not me? Right? And granted, we do, their workplace was designed initially around a certain kind of white male. We know that processes and things were designed around it, but the workplace is evolving. So if the workplace is evolving, and those of us who are different from that normative person are busy thinking, why aren't I him? If I was him, I'd be doing a better job, then we're holding ourselves back. Remember what we said, what society has and what the world has and what the media has to say over and over again. You need to make a judgment call for yourself, whether it even makes sense to you and whether it's applicable. As for having nerves, as for not knowing, when I started my career as an engineer, I just couldn't believe as a young engineer that they really thought I could design things that went into a car that people would drive. I mean, are they mad? Like, how am I supposed to? And I remember I used to go to one of the more senior engineers frequently and go and say, I just did this design. What do you think? And I tested it and this. And I remember so well, his name's Steve. He said to me, Lucy, you're doing fine. You're doing a great job. You keep asking me these questions. Every time you find, just believe what you're doing. You're great, right? Of course, if it was now, I would say I had imposter syndrome. But that's just regular. And I do this to encourage, I ask the question to encourage people that you are enough. Not another version of you is enough. You are enough. And the other human being who could have been doing your job, that person is enough if they have the job. But guess what? They don't have the job. You were offered the job. But there must be a group of people sitting somewhere who think you can do the job. So you need to agree with them and get on with doing it and deal with the challenges and deal with the days that you have off days. We all have off days. We all have nerves. We all have, oh my goodness, I completely messed up. Oh, I went into that meeting, that thing I said, completely wrong. Yeah, I can come back if it's business critical and say, guys, mea culpa, that was wrong. But it doesn't make me a bad person or an imposter. It means that I made a mistake or I was nervous or I couldn't do it. So please, 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 let the world say what they want to say about imposter syndrome. That's fine. That's their latest thing to sell to people and, talk to them. You don't have to own it. You don't have to own every fad. There'll be something else very soon, I'm sure. But you don't have to embrace it. Be you. Focus on your journey and drive your journey.
There was a question that has come through because you mentioned that one of the main reasons or prompt for you to start writing was mentoring. Mentoring and support networks are critical.
Yes.
For career development, personal development. How can firms create mentoring opportunities for young people? for those who are starting their careers. Or
Yeah.
for even, because even some at senior ranks need a lot of mentoring, and I don't think that is widely used. So
Everybody needs mentoring. I'm still mentored. I'm still coached.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to go places I haven't gone yet. So if I stop being guided, I'm not going to get very far. I don't want to be the only guide I have. I don't want Lucy to be my only guide. You hear me talk a lot about people in my life because I value. So look, firms need to be very intentional and structured about mentoring, not sort of ad hoc. So the matching process has to be very intentional. Match the need with who can provide the need, right? This is extremely important. The other thing you need to do is to be intentional about checking in as to whether the process is working or not. So I believe that mentoring and coaching, where possible, opportunities, they're not the same, but they're both necessary, should be provided throughout the pyramid of the organization, but much more so at the start of the organization when people come in. I remember I had an engineering mentor, Terry, who was my mentor for many, many years, who guided me on what is this whole being an engineer? I've studied it, but now I'm in the workplace. What do I do with it? So people need guidance. If an and it's a win-win for a firm, let me emphasize that, because as your people grow and mature in their journeys, obviously it goes without saying that the company gets more out of them and you build them up quicker if you're mentoring them. But also, don't only think of mentoring as someone higher mentoring someone more junior. So in one of my roles at Morgan Stanley, I actually introduced a program of reverse mentoring. And you've probably done it here. Not every organization has done it, but I've been in situations where I've been a reverse mentor. And it serves a purpose for more senior people to learn from more junior people, to really take the time and embrace the engagement as a learning opportunity. One of the biggest reasons why that is important today in our world is that we're in a shifting phase, post-COVID, post so many things that have happened. The world is shifting, except it's shifting in a way where an older generation and a younger generation are viewing that shift completely differently. Right, completely differently. So for instance, I take one example of sort of working in the office. I know as an accounting firm, you're very dispersed, but there's some firms that used to be very office-based. And so you have an older group of people who are like, we need to be office-based. This is how it works. This is what we know. And then you have a younger generation going, I went to university virtually. I don't know why you're insisting I should come. Talk to them and understand their why. Why are you saying this? What's driving you? What's the key thing? So mentoring is extremely important. It's an investment. The mentee should be structured as well. So as a mentee, every time you go, when I'm mentoring people, I always give them homework. I expect you to do homework. And if you come and you're not doing the homework, it means you're not serious about this. Mentoring is work. It's not like just a nice coffee and a conversation and a chat. It's an opportunity to work on yourself and improve yourself. So please take it seriously. Companies should really provide opportunities and time for that mentoring to happen.
I happen to know that you have a very different view of DEI and the E in the DEI. What is your view on firms? Because COVID, a lot of firms this is very topical in a lot of firms, and firms are interpreting DEI in many ways. I would like to get your take on DEI.
Yeah, so, when people talk about DEI, especially when you talk about diversity and inclusion, so there's this thing about diversity being identifying the different groups and so on, and then inclusion, people coming in, and of course they talk about belonging, and some of the interpretations I've heard is one is about being invited to the party, and another one is about being asked to dance, right? Kind of thing. My question is, whose party is it? Right? And when I say whose party is it, whose party determines the music? Right? So inviting me to dance is not enough. Are you adjusting the music to ensure that I also identify with the music that you play? Right? So we need to go the ultimate place we need to get to, particularly if we want to have a more equitable world, is that we need to get to a place where what I bring to the table, what you bring to the table, what individuals bring to the table, the collective is the norm, not the one that isn't the norm. Is that clear to everyone? So for instance, a few months ago, my cousin got married. Ghanaian background, grew up in Manchester. Her new husband is Scandinavian. They went to this wedding, and part of the speeches were in English, part was in as should be. Some of the food was Ghanaian, some of the food was, some of the music was Scandinavian, some of the music was, but everybody found an expression of how they celebrate weddings in that ceremony. So suddenly it wasn't one side's wedding or another side's wedding, it was our wedding altogether. And organizations need to get to a point where the way different groups express their performance and their excellence is recognized and appreciated and valued, so that DEI isn't just about, oh, I recognize that you're Black, I recognize that you're invited, I'm playing some music, let's dance. No, I recognize that you have other things that are all equally important to you. Can we add that to the mix and make it a whole? It's the whole that we need to change. We're constantly focused on how we get the people outside to come in. No, what is in, and how do we fashion in so that they're coming in? It's just the norm. I'm very much about what is normative, and we're not addressing what is normative in our world. I hope that's what I said.
Absolutely. We have some questions coming through, and I'm keen to give others the chance to ask the questions. Like I said in the beginning, this is not a listening event. This is a participation event. So everybody's questions are welcome. So in the room, stop me, or I will go on. Any questions in the room? Okay. I've got some questions that people sent through before the event, and I would just like to address them. They're all out. Some of them are like rapid fire questions. Okay. Are you ready, Lucy?
I'm ready.
What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the phrase Black girl magic?
Excellence.
Excellence. I hope you all got that. Lucy, do you want to say that again?
Excellence.
I did that on purpose. What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
There's never a good time. Get on with it.
If someone were to play you in a movie, who would you want it to be?
Angela Bassett.
Oh, yeah.
She's awesome. She's just got this sort of tenacity, this fire, this sort of, I've got this thing about her.
Absolutely. What movie best describes your life? I don't know who sent these ones to, but that person's obsessed with movies.
Yeah. What movie best describes my life? That's a really tough one. I'm probably going to have to think about a movie now, a movie script that I need to write. As you do.
We can leave you for a few minutes there. And
I'll ponder that one. That's an interesting question. movie. Okay, I'll come back to that.
Someone is just obsessed with movies.
That's fine. That's
all I can say. What is the one thing you want people to take away from today's talk?
The change you want is you. You know, we do these things, and we're always about what needs to change, and we talk, and we'll have Black History Month, and we'll you are the change. Just focus on what you need to do to make you the person who's representative of the change that you want to see, because everyone has a sphere of influence. If I epitomized what I want to see in the world, my sphere of influence will be influenced to reflect what I put out. You are the change that you want to see. It's up to you. If you want that change, go for it.
And that was, I can understand that, because I remember that back in 2020, I had a moment when, well, post George Floyd, that was not the time, but there was a period when I felt frustrated with certain things. And then I said, Maxine, why are you frustrated with yourself, with how things are? What have you done about it lately? And I feel like one can't speak too much about an issue if they don't put themselves into that, solving that issue for themselves. So
you need to put and yes. Look, people are busy. I'm not saying everyone has all the time in the world to do what everyone else is doing, but there is, if something matters to you enough, you will do something about it. If you just want to talk about it, fine, then you don't want change. You just need something to moan about. And if it's not that, you'll find something else. But if you really want change, you can be it. You can definitely be that change.
We have a question. Yeah.
So the question is, what's next for you in your journey, Lucy?
Very interesting question, and I love the question. Actually, that's the one question I anticipated, even though I don't know who that person is. I did anticipate.
Siobhan.
I anticipated. Look, as I mentioned to you, I left my role in August, and one of my big drivers for that were two things. There's two big drivers. One is last year I hosted my first conference based on the book, The Bold New Normal, because it's really about bringing change makers together. This year, we're having the second one in just under 3 weeks from now, on the 21st of October. And it's been interesting. I felt led to have a conference. And then the second year, now realize that it's a huge amount of work to run a platform that's a conference that we will do other things within the coming year. So one is to focus on that. The other is that, look, I've had a relatively long career. I started working in the 90s, so you can figure out how old I am. So the other reason, and I'm a very intentional person, still driven by my why. My why hasn't fundamentally changed. So where I am now is I want to give myself the opportunity to really figure out this last phase of career. Sounds tough to say, but it's true. I'm guessing you're more into that phase of my career, which will be, you go there and then it's. So what is that going to be about? And I need to think about that. I need to be intentional. I can't just keep going and going and going and going and wake up one morning, oh, I've retired now. How nice. What did I spend the rest of the time doing? And some may say, but Lucy, you've already had a great career. I have, but what am I going to use all that for? What value does that create for the world in it? Okay, maybe I'm going to be too deep with it, my next response, but I fundamentally believe that I have to have an impact on the world that makes it different in some way, more than just I have lived, I have generated, I know wealth, value, I've spent it on myself and my children, we've had a nice time and life is over and goodbye. That's me. Doesn't mean that everyone has to do the same. So I'm looking for that next phase of it. Yes, I've done some of that value creation, but what's the next part that I could really use all that I've learned, all that I experienced to achieve? So those are two drivers. So what next is I'm figuring it out. Is that such a liberating answer?
It is very bold.
He spoilt me. My dad spoilt me. and you know, he literally did. So he would have sessions that he's very much about debate. And I'd be this tiny little thing. And he'd be having a debate with his friends. He'd go, let's see what Lucy thinks about this. And he'll call me into this debate. I am sure that 9 times out of 10, what I said was nonsense. I'm sure, because I didn't know. But he just gave me this, you have a voice. We want to hear it. Tell us what you are thinking. And here we are.
That's important. Well, before we end, I just want to give the room, because there are some excited faces here, but it's finally come to the end of our session. And I want to say a big thank you to Lucy. I want to say a big thank you to the whole team behind this. It just doesn't happen. I'm just going to slide in. Anyone that wants to help, you know where to find me, but thank you so much for the team in the room, the Black Kearney team, all the allies for making this happen. Now, we've learned quite a lot today, yes. Lucy. You've given us a lot to think about. First most, and as a parent, I should say socializing with your kids is important. What you tell your kids is important. What you tell young people is important. So let's use that wisely. Also,
even in the workplace, by the way.
Even in the workplace, we should be mindful of what it is that we tell each other and the encouragements we give each other, because there's an impact. Everything you say or do has an impact. And I think everybody has to be aware of the influence and the impact that they have on each other. You should be a little bit more thoughtful of that. You can't just waltz into life saying what you want to say, doing what you want to do. It does affect people. And the last thing, and I think I'm gonna remember this forever, is the change that you want is you. So think about the change that you want, and also how do you live this world and what the impacts that you will make on the world. Did I capture everything accurately?
Yeah, you really, really did. And I thank you for that. And if anyone thinks of any question they want to ask later, then please do reach out. But did someone think of a movie for me from the things that I said?
The Notebook.
The Notebook.
The movie itself, even behind the word.
Okay, so Whitney,
So we need a notebook. We need a notebook movie now, the one that you know about. I like that. I like that. The Notebook. I actually like that. I tell you why I like it. It's so important that we capture what we know, what we've learned, what we've experienced, so it becomes what others also get to read. My next book is about leadership. That's also one of the reasons part of the next phase. But I realized that the thing that has driven me on the context of leadership is that how many times do we hear from leaders who look like me? And remember what I said about the change? If I think that people should see leadership that has different faces, and I know I'm one of them, then I need to make that sacrifice of writing that book that someone gets to say, this is a Black woman's leadership. It's not about Black woman leadership. It's about leadership, but should happen to be written by someone who looks different. Right. So I really appreciate your engagement. Thank you for inviting me. It's been an awesome time, and I will take that away. The notebook. I'm going to remember. I'm always sourcing my ideas because it's like people are such a treasure trove, worth more than gold. So thank you all.
And we will be keeping an eye on what you do next, Lucy. So until next time, I will be seeing you next week, same time, for the next episode of the Sisterhood series. Thank you so much.